Hey, what's good, everyone? Welcome back to Sneaker Convos. We've made it through 3+ days of some interesting conversations connected to sneakers, within sneakers, how to be better about getting involved, how to be better about consuming and learning about sustainability and closed loop production, and I mean just a ton of different things. And one of the things that's kind of an interesting side shoot where I find many of my friends are living in both of these two really, really nuanced worlds is trading cards and the hobby, as some would call it. But I think what's interesting is sport brings us kind of all into all of these things initially. And then we find all these other crazy, interesting ways to be connected to each other, the products and whatnot. But also, what I want to talk about with you all is there's kind of a connection in like the crazy hype cycle of trading cards versus the way sneakers kind of set this tone, I would say, a few years ago. And, it's gone exponentially different directions for everybody and for every, facet of these hobbies. But so first off, I want to introduce everybody. Andy, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Nick, thanks for having me. My name is Andy Park. I am an entrepreneur. I love cards. I love sporting cards, sports cards, Pokemon, all that stuff. I got back into the hobby around 2016, right after Cubs won the World Series. And it started from, let me just buy some rookie cards of these Cubby players that I love, and then kind of morphed into, Cubs players, how about Bulls players, how about Jordan, how about Kobe, LeBron, so on and so forth. And 4 years later, here I am.
How about you, Julie?
What's up, guys? Good to see you, Andy and Mitch and Nick. Thanks for having us. My name's Julie. I collected a lot of cards when I was a young kid, back in the late 80s, early 90s, and then had a break from the industry when I was interested into other things like video games, which is what I do for my career now, and recently got back into cards a little bit after Andy. It was late 2017, early 2018. I remember getting 2018 Topps Chrome as my kind of dip my feet back into the water of trading cards, and then it's just exploded from there.
How about you, Mitch?
Yeah, so my name is Mitch. Thank you for having me on. I'm glad I get to see all your faces again because I feel like it's been forever. But yeah, I basically just got back into cards probably about a year ago now. Andy and Julie have been super helpful in getting me back onboarded because I feel like I have the same story as all of us do about all of these various hobbies. It's like we did it as a kid and now we have money, so now we do it again because we can afford it. But yeah, it's been really, really fun to learn how this has evolved over the past 20 years I've been alive. So yeah, I'm ready to get into it.
Yeah. So just a kind of precursor, like I lovingly say and blame and thank all three of these folks for kind of pushing me back towards this hobby also, because I think it might have even been around that Cubs World Series. I know you weren't jabbing at me, or I'm going to assume that you weren't jabbing at me, but that's actually the last time I think you and I might have connected in Chicago while I was out there, because I went over there to see the Giants play in the playoffs and got to go to Wrigley for the first time. And it was interesting because between like getting a couple of Iverson cards from Mitch, some stuff from Julie, talking about the F1 stuff that was starting to come out, and then you and I talking about this at SneakerCon with this energy that was bubbling under the surface, for 3-4 years. I think it's almost inevitable, right? Like if you're passionate about whether it's sports or sneakers, comics, there's so many Pokemon, there's so many different facets of this. I think it's successful for many reasons that aren't talked about at all. And the main thing being, for me as a consumer who collects, like I just did a panel about fitted hats, right? I have literally hundreds of fitted hats. I have hundreds of sneakers. I collect way too many things, and I don't suggest that for anyone. But if you're going to, cards are a much smaller, easier item to take with you to enjoy, and you can enjoy in much different way that doesn't take up a lot of physical space. So I think at its roots, there's something even better than, not to say that it's better or worse, but there is something for me that I see as like, hey, this could be something completely long term. Yeah. So what was kind of the first shocking moment of coming back into it? Because I think, like, at this point, the nostalgia of it, is always a part of it for me, whether it's sneakers or cars or, hats. Like, all of these memories are me kind of reliving those moments that I thought as a youth, as a teenager, that I didn't get to be enough of a part of. But then, like, that can spiral completely out of control in a lot of different ways, because there's just a lot of cool things that have happened through the years. So what were the kind of, like, getting back into it, talk about maybe one or two of the situations or things that kind of surprised you, or where, like, you felt like you got the hook in you and were really committed back to it.
I could start. So the thing that really sticks out was the day that I discovered what a break was. And for those, that don't know anything about trading cards, so growing up, it was, you just go to the drugstore, you go to the card shop, you ask for one pack, you open up a pack, and then repeat till you run out of money or whatever, right? I stopped collecting because cards got too expensive when I was a kid, right? But now, you grow up, you have, like Mitch said, you have money, and, you can spend money on things, disposable income. Somebody introduced me to the concept of what a break was. And basically what a break is they divide up the product, whether it be a box or 10 boxes or 5 boxes, and then you divide it into teams. So if you like the Cubs and Nick likes the Giants, and Juli likes Oakland, and Mitch likes
don't you dare say the Astros. I will punch you in the face.
And Mitch is a Yankee guy. He's looking for the next hot Yankee. We can all buy into the same opening, right? And it'll all be different tiered prices and all that stuff. And so it's a great low cost way to get just cards of players that you want to get. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. And then just learning how much the hobby has developed since late 80s, early 90s, and, just that type of experience.
Yeah, for me, it was a friend that I actually grew up with, was living in LA as well. This is when I was in Los Angeles a few years ago. And he's like, Juli, have you gotten back into cards recently? Like, there's some really cool stuff. And like, I've been a baseball fan forever. I didn't ever lose kind of track of like watching games and paying attention. But the idea of like getting rookie cards again and stuff was just something that like I hadn't thought about in a while. And as Nick and everyone knows here, like I collect shoes, hats, that kind of thing. And I was like, oh yeah, I can do this. Like where's there a card shop that I can go buy cards from? And it was just, and then like getting back into Topps Chrome, I was like, oh man, like the last, Topps Chrome-esque pack of cards I had opened was like the 1995 Topps Finest, like NBA stuff, right? Which is like amazing and colorful and cool, but like also was, 12 years before or 15 years before I, even longer than that, I can't do math right now, had gotten back into like modern day cards.
Yeah.
How about you, Mitch?
For me, it was, I had heard grumblings about it on Instagram, whether it was Andy posting it or people that are in our circle, like posting about cards. And I was like, oh, this is actually like kind of interesting. I haven't even thought about trading cards since I was like 10 years old. And I was like, wait, these are really cool. And the nostalgia hit. It's the same as the sneaker thing. Like I compare all of this back to sneakers because that's what I did originally. Mm-hmm. And I think like the catalyst that got me back and like got me to purchase a trading card again was realizing that like my favorite player ever, Peyton Manning, was about to get enshrined into the Hall of Fame in 2 years. And I was like, okay, like this is probably going to be my last chance to obtain this card before it hits the moon. And like, that was where I was like, okay, I'll just get like some Peyton Manning cards that I had always dreamt of as a kid, and like I'll stop. And of course, I never stopped. But yeah, I would say the Peyton Manning thing and like my rush into it before everybody else did, just so I could get the guy that I really wanted. And then of course, after Peyton, I was like, oh, I have to get all the 2020 rookie class. I'm sitting here with Jonathan Taylor rookie patch auto on my desk, and like, it's just been all downhill from there.
Is it a specific sport or specific, thing that keeps you interested and loops you back in, or is it now that you're fully back into the hobby, it's kind of a free for all as to like what gets you excited?
I almost treat it as like, so I do the investment side, but I do the investment side to afford the stuff that I want to do. I can't just go spend my paycheck on cards. Like, I'll turn stuff into that I know is going to make money. I'll turn that into the stuff that I want. Like, Andy and I were going back and forth on this LeBron card that I have on my desk for a little bit. And it's this Bazooka LeBron rookie card in a PSA 9. And was it my dream to own a LeBron rookie card? Not really. Is it really cool to own it? Yeah. But I do know that this card is only going to go up the longer I hold on to it. So it's like, it's another form of a savings account to me that I can look at.
Yeah, for me, I'm more into it just from the hobby perspective. I think I got a little bit lucky on the 2018 purchases that I was able to kind of move some cards that afforded me to stay in on the hobby front. But I think as one of the things we might talk about is just the exponential rise in prices of cards this past year. And, a lot of the, conversation was, oh, it's because of COVID and everyone's finding like new hobbies. But like, that's not going to go away now, right? It's like the hobby is booming. The prices have now been priced out for kind of the typical kind of like, let's buy a pack of cards at the drugstore or the corner store, or even your like local card shop. And so that was happening last year, as we were all kind of hunkered down. And when I remember when 2020 Chrome came out, I was like, I'm not going to spend $250 on a hobby box that I'm going to get 96 cards in. And there's a high percent of like garbage cards, right? In the sense of like not players that I want to keep, not players that I can move. And so last year for me, I actually, for a lot of the baseball stuff, I chased some players that I was like, yeah, I'll spend a couple $100s on a player's cards that I want to add from this particular year just to the collection. But yeah, for me, it changed really last year from really just kind of like focusing on the hobby side of it and how I've become a consumer this past year with it, just because it's priced out a lot of casual consumers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when I started, because of the 2016 Cubs winning the World Series, I did baseball exclusively for, I think, almost the first 2 years. And basketball was kind of like this scary thing that, I didn't really quite understand. The prices I knew were a multiple, higher than baseball. And football was just kind of, it was just kind of there. Like there wasn't really that much energy in football at the time until later with like Mahomes and Deshaun Watson, his rookie year and his breakout rookie campaign. So yeah, it was primarily baseball for me, but I think it was more because I didn't want to put myself into a position where it just wasn't fun anymore, So it's like, you want to learn. I wanted to learn as much as I could about the baseball side of the hobby. And then my assumption was that I can apply that to the other sports and kind of learn it a little bit faster. You know what I mean? And kind of maybe make less mistakes or regret less things.
So now that you are, let's say fast forward 3-4 years of doing this, would that be, would you give that similar advice to the next person that's looking to either get back into it, or the younger kids that are, just setting foot in it now?
Yeah, I think there's so much more out there in terms of resources and tools to educate yourself. I mean, message boards are always there and they've always been there. But just like the number of people who are involved in Instagram and posting up content like analytics, right? Like people are using graphs and charts and they're charting the prices of these cards as if they were stocks.
Yep.
You know, and they're creating all the lines and candles and I don't, you know, whatever. And then, so there's information like that out there. There's also like a wealth of content on YouTube now of people doing product reviews, unboxings, you know, and that really wasn't around when I first started, you know, and they're just going over like this product has cost this much, has this, and this in it, you know, is it a good buy? You know, here's my opinion on it, you know, stuff like that. So I think it's a lot easier for people now to educate themselves. And I think it's just a great way to just really fall in love with the hobby.
Yeah. Yeah. So that leads me into a lot of the conversation I wanted to get into, because as a casual fan of the hobby, right? I'm not looking at investing in any way. I mean, of course, because of the pandemic, because of my, you know, work in sneakers throughout all these years, like I think of that stuff because why wouldn't I? If I can be aware that, hey, this pair of shoes might be worth 5 times what I paid for it if I sit on it or take care of it, you know, I'd be an idiot to not at least acknowledge that, right? Mm-hmm. Because it does affect the way you think about things. But at the same time, I'm also, you know, as I was saying, I think it took me, you know, all of a few days or a week to go from like Juli introducing me to Formula One and saying Formula One and Topps we're working together to how many of these do I need? Like, do I need to put together sets for my future children? Do I need to put together sets for, you know, my nephews? Like, that's kind of the way I approach it. And, you know, everybody that's watched any of these conversations so far probably kind of realizes that from this event, right? It was literally supposed to be 4 or 5 conversations and turned into 4.5, 5 days of 30 something panels. But that's just, I think, like, we're in this awesome place. As much as there's a lot of shitty things out there in the world over the last year and a half, you know, and I don't want to dismiss those things. I also want to try to be a positive connector of people and influence in the world, and like show people that we can talk about all these things, have fun with it, and you know, enjoy it at the same time. And I think that is kind of where I'm coming from, you know, to Mitch's point about, you know, Peyton Manning, right? Like, you know, I'm sorry that that's your favorite player, but like, that's great for you. But at the same time, you know, like, also thinking about that he's going to be in the Hall, right? Like, no brainer, right? Like, absolutely. Like, that's the thing that, like, you know, I mean, I'm just thinking, like, I can't see it on my head, but I'm wearing an 87 Oakland A's All-Star patch Giants hat because that was my first Will Clark memory. Like, that's it for me, right? Like, so what do you guys think of that side of the hobby, right? Like the passionate fans, right? And like chasing, kind of to Julie's point about chasing some of the players specifically that she likes. How will that end up being a part of this, you know, whatever comes from this? Because the thing I always think about is like, you know, if you fast or rewind 20 years or whatever it is when we all started in this, most of the players that I vividly remember somebody's card of have no meaning to the rest of the world at this point. So
I think that's the great part about it, though, right? Is like you could make this whatever you want it to be. Like, I own so many cards from people that will probably never matter to most people. Like, I hold this Hot Rod auto. He's Rodrigo Blankenship from the Colts. He's a rookie kicker, and I'm like, his whole thing is respect the specs, and he wears these goofy glasses every time he plays, and like that is not going to be worth anything to anybody forever. But like, I like cherish that thing like it's my baby. So I think that's the important part about this, is that you never lose that side. Sure, you can chase the money, whatever. You can chase the star rookies of the year, but like, if you come to the point where you lose the part of these like no-name people that you just love, like it might be time for you to kind of step aside.
Yeah, I think, and I'll answer somebody's question in chat was, are there talking about cards that don't exist that you want? And I think one of the things with like modern cards nowadays is that there are cards for a lot of things that you never thought there was cards for, right? So it's like, you don't even have to be a sports fan to come into the kind of collecting hobby that is trading cards, right? Like, and one of my favorite pack rips that I did was my local card shop in LA had a bunch of the James Bond cards. And I mean, for those of you who don't know, I worked at MGM for 10 years, right? And I was like, oh, these are cool. Like, I'll buy a couple packs. And I bought 2 boxes and ripped a Roger Moore autograph and a George Lazenby autograph. And George is my favorite Bond, even though he's only ever in one. I think it's the best one. And so it was like super fun to kind of open something that wasn't, one of the things that isn't, an $800 box of Panini Prism hobbies that you'll get an autograph for an NBA player that you might not know, right? I was like, yeah, let's open up some James Bond stuff. And I know, there's Star Wars content. There's, obviously Andy had mentioned the Pokemon cards, which got a lot of kids into it in, the early 2000s. And there's just so much you can do. And I think one of the things that I'm also having a lot of fun with nowadays is that like some spotlight on, women athletes and Panini releasing like the WNBA set and Upper Deck having Serena as an athlete that signs for them. And, you're able to kind of bring in not just your standard, like what we all think of in our head sports card collector. I think there's a bigger reach for the audience. And just people who are a fan in general, like soccer's taking off, huge, like F1 is back. Like they have NASCAR cards now, and Topps did a whole thing around the election and the debates leading into the election. Right. So it's like, you could get into it from a political side, and there's so much content.
Yeah, I think what I realized quickly about this hobby was that there's literally something for everybody. And I think that's part of the beauty of the hobby is like, oh, I can't afford this, $10,000 Zion. Well, that's okay. I mean, there's $5 Zions out there, there's cards. There are people at card shows that exclusively go to just sit and dig through 10-cent piles. And they find like tremendous amount of joy in doing that. Like they'll sit there for hours. And, they're looking for cards to complete a set. It's like, you're just treasure hunting, right? At that point. And then there are guys that go around and they're looking for like a $50,000 card. They're looking for a $100,000 card. There are guys looking to spend $1 million on, cards that are literally only 1 or 2 in existence. So I think that's kind of the great thing about the hobby. All different genres, like Julie mentioned, James Bond cards. We did Game of Thrones cards. Last month, tennis cards, and it's like all these random things that you can find. Like it's just amazing, and just learning that there's people out there who take joy and truly love and enjoy, opening those types of products. It's
yeah,
awesome.
I think one important thing that none of us touched on, but we'll all agree with, is that like it's the people too of like coming together like this. Like I love hanging out in Andy's IG lives, even though I'm not buying anything sometimes, just to like shoot the shit and see what people are landing and like celebrate with them and be a part of the moment. And like, it's just like a cool chance, especially in the situation we're in right now, of like the sense of hanging out with all those guys and opening up cards and watching them win and feeling like you're winning because they're winning. Mm-hmm. Like it's a really cool thing to be a part of with all these people.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think to Julie's point, kind of to everyone's point here, like I go back to like the cards also introducing me to other things, right? Like the same way, like I mentioned this on maybe on one of the conversations, but like the thing about music for me was always much bigger than the music, right? I would buy the album, buy the cassette, buy the CD, and dig through the names, and I would go hunt down those names. The same way that you're talking about somebody digging through a 10-cent card pile, right? I would go find other artists because I would find a producer that I liked, and I would find more hip hop that way. I would find more rock albums based on the writers. So I always kind of appreciate the discovery aspect of a lot of things because I'm always trying to learn. And I go back to like, actually it just popped up here. I was going to say, I go back to like sports cards as a kid, but then Marvel cards really invigorated my interest in comic books. That would have never happened without those cards because I was so heavy into the sports thing as a young teenager that I think that was like such a cool discovery. And to your point, Mitch, it's been really awesome for me to I guess like kind of to touch on what Andy said too about like the community aspect of it and the just accessibility of these very nuanced interests and very passionate about it, right? You all might know Cody Template, who used to go by GT Fan 712 on social media and does a bunch of sneaker related, stuff. We had a conversation a few months back on one of my podcasts, but it went from sneakers to shutting off the camera to talking about Formula One for a couple of hours, which then turned into talking about Formula One cards, which then he started getting back into Formula One cards. And then a month ago, he invited me to a Formula One specific Discord group. Just cards, not even talking much about Formula One itself, right? It's like it's a small group, maybe 40, 50 people or whatever, but like having that ability to dive so deep into the nuances of this passion that we all kind of share also makes it so much more fun for me to be able to learn all these things, right? Yeah. And I think that's like something that I don't see as like, you don't even realize that as you're doing it. And you can't explain that as you're doing it because you're, like Mitch said, you're just shooting the shit as somebody rips a pack or whatever. And next thing you know, you're like discovering something completely new to you based on, really these silly little pieces of, paper, right? Like, what? How did this happen?
Yeah.
So I guess like in thinking that, like, what do you think are other than the passion of, a particular sport or just being something that you're into, what are the similarities now versus, when you were younger into it in terms of the way the business is? Not even the business, the hobby, I should say.
It's a good question.
I mean, sorry.
Go for it, Julie. Yeah, that's all you.
I was going to say, I mean, for me, it was like the surprise and delight of like opening something and being like, oh, I don't know that player. I want to like learn about that player, read that. Like I was the kid who was reading all the box scores the next day because I didn't have, we like didn't have cable and I wanted to pay attention to what was going on in Chicago and all of that stuff. And so, seeing like new cards or like inserts, because like, inserts galore from, the 1993 whatever NBA series you wanted to kind of check out. And like they were colorful and cool. And I was like, oh man, these are cool. And like the parallel that I have to that when I got back into 2018, I was like, these are cool. Like there's shiny and new and colorful. And one of the things that happened, I like fortunate now, like hindsight, I opened a Juan Soto autograph card. And I was like, this is cool. He's got the best signature I've ever seen. I was like, I'm going to just start PCing this guy because, like, I don't know a whole lot about him. Like, I didn't pay attention to Washington baseball. I'm like an AL person over here on the West Coast. And I was like, this is cool. He's young. Like, I suddenly have a bunch of his rookie cards and now this auto card. And if you have not ever seen Juan Soto's auto, please Google it. It's amazing. And so I was like, and now I'm like sitting on a small fortune of Juan Soto rookie cards. But it was just because I was like, this dude has a cool auto. I'm just going to decide to collect a few of his cards because they happen to all be in the same, box that I opened. But it was totally that moment of like surprise and delight, discovery of a new player, of somebody new to pay attention to. All for like shiny, colorful things,
Yeah, I mean, I've learned so much over the past year of like everything I did as a kid was like so wrong and like did not ever do that. It's like I was just buying these packs randomly and I and once I started to get back into this, I had my parents mail me my like boxes upon boxes of cards that were just stacked, not protected or anything, just to see what I had. And like after days upon days of going through that, I think I ended up with like keeping 20 cards. And it's like we had like thousands of base cards as a kid that we valued so highly, and then you come and you like eBay it now and it's like worth $0, and you're like, oh man, I had no idea what I'm doing. But like now that I've learned all this, it's like it's made me get a lot more interested in sports across the board. Like I had always watched my teams, but like outside of my teams, I wasn't watching very much. But like as I see these players, I like I have a bunch of RJ Barrett rookie cards. I have a bunch of Rui Hachimura rookie cards. Like I enjoy like keeping up with those teams now because I like to see those guys perform well. And I don't sports bet. I'm assuming it's the same kind of thing there of like it makes you attached to whatever is happening in real life. But like I like to see these guys do well, so I watch them in real life now. And I would have just never have understood that as a 10-year-old kid buying his like paper Topps packs from Walmart or Meijer.
Yeah, I think kind of echoing what Julie said in terms of like just discovering and that aspect of discovery. There's a similarity from when I opened up packs when I was a kid, and I did the same thing, Julie. I mean, I was looking at box scores the next day, seeing who's leading the league in RBIs, and how far behind is Frank Thomas from betting title, and how many RBIs does Julio Franco have, or Edgar Martinez, and stuff like that. There's part of that is lost now, I think, in terms of like looking at the back of a baseball card, so to speak. But at the same time, I think there's innovation and just like really cool designs and techniques that are being used in the card industry now that literally just blow your mind. Like all the time I open up, packs, and there's all these inserts and cards that come up, and sometimes on stream we're just like in awe of just like how awesome that card looks, and stuff like that is just really, really enjoyable. I find that to be really enjoyable.
Yeah, it's great to know that like if we were all in the same neighborhood as kids, we would have been great friends, because I nerded out over box scores hardcore. Like
yeah.
Julie and I could go deep on that conversation with wanting to go to a baseball game and keep our own score, keeping score for the family softball teams, like all of those things. It was just like baseball cards made that stuff even more enjoyable for me, in that aspect of a sports fan. But it's funny because like I just popped into my head. I have this interesting talk about messing things up as a kid in sports cards, right? I worked from like 11 years old in some way, shape, or form. I mowed lawns, I shoveled snow, I did anything I possibly could, landscaping. Like if there was manual labor needed anywhere, if I could get there, I would get there and make some money off of it. So one of the first times that I saved up, this is a long, long time ago. I'm 11 years old, 89 Donruss. I wanted a King Griffey Jr. rookie card. I had saved up $30. I rode my bike up to the 7-Eleven, not thinking about how I would get those cards home on my BMX bike. It's only like a mile or something, but I unfortunately couldn't hold back from opening all the packs right outside of the 7-Eleven door, and got on my bike with 2 stacks of cards. Unfortunately, I didn't get a King Griffey Jr. rookie card. I've still never had that card. One day I'll grab it, but I'm riding my bike with 2 stacks of cards and get to the stoplight, hit the button, wait, get going, get across the street, hit a little bit of gravel, cars go flying everywhere.
No.
I still have scars on my knee from it, but it's one of my greatest memories at the same time, because, it's like, just like that was part of being a kid and just doing it because you were just so into it, And I think that's kind of fascinating too, because you're able to find those things, right? Like nerding out on an autograph is absolutely something I do, right? Like I'm fascinated by that specifically, the way people write, the way people, sign their names, the way people, quit the name and use symbols in modern era of like, oh, I only need to draw like the 3 lines out of this 48 character first and last name that I would normally have to sign. So I think that this conversation is great too, because we're talking about the nuances that can really get people excited about it, the design, the players specifically. And I think one of the other fascinating things about cards for me now, or not even now, but like in more recent years, is bringing in like pieces of the jersey, pieces of the shoes, like design aspects that we normally, or I guess in years past, we would have never thought that was even a part of a card, because we've expanded what a card actually is. So how do you guys look at those types of things, in terms of the hobby and the collecting aspect of it? Is, because a lot of times the cooler the stuff is, the more unobtainable it becomes in 2020, 2021.
Yeah, there's a card out there that exists. It's a Zion Williamson card. He's in his college uni, so he's still in his Duke uni. And it's a huge part. It's the Jumpman of the tongue. I'm sorry, no, it's the side Air Jordan wings logo off of one of his shoes. And it's just right there on this, like this huge, it takes up literally the entire card. And when I saw that, I was like, I need to have that card.
I'll hear a dollar sign. I just hear the cash register ching, 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 ching.
Yeah, going off.
But it is like ridiculously expensive, and there's only like 2, I think, that exist, and there's no way. So
yeah.
I am like not a traditionalist in the sense of like I don't necessarily like chase like patch cards or whatnot. I think they're cool. It's one of those things that I haven't come across a lot in my most recent collecting. I have a handful of RPAs, which stands for Rookie Patch Auto, but I don't have a huge collection, and I haven't seen that Zion card. I'm assuming if I did, I would have thought the exact same thing, because it's like the collision of 2 dear to my heart hobbies.
Yeah.
One of the things that I like on the baseball side of it is they're doing like the end of the bats, right, that have like the player insignia or whatever it is, and I think those are cool. And again, those are like trying to find like the logo man from an NBA jersey on a card. I mean, they're just unattainable, right? It's just, they're so cool.
Yeah, I think we could have like multiple hour-long conversation about pricing people out of this market. And like, I am fully aware that I am priced out of the patch auto like realm of conversations, especially after you see these news stories of these $4 million Luka logo man selling and all that sorts of stuff. So like, it's all about, like we've said this over and over again, it's about finding your lane. And like, I love the sneak peek insert from Immaculate, I think it is. Mm-hmm. And like, I think that's the sickest thing ever, because I love sneakers and like, that's just my thing. So obviously I want a card that features somebody's outlandish sneakers, their autograph cemented forever on this like laminate card. Like, that's cool to me, but I also can't afford it. So it's all about finding what you want, I guess, or what you're willing to pay up for.
One of my favorite things about, like, I collect Ja Morant cards, not only because I like him as a player, but he also wears really colorful, wild PEs, right? He wears a lot of Kobe's, he wears a lot of Jordan brand, like, and they're all reflected on his cards, right? Like,
yeah, his prism is the SpongeBob.
Yeah, exactly, right? So like, it's finding other things that you appreciate in the hobby makes for like what Andy was saying, where you just kind of go like digging through cards and to try and find those things that kind of stand out and become personal to you.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So it also makes me wonder about kind of like, you know, to the conversation of pricing people out, right? Like, you know, we've been through this in sneakers already, right? All of us are passionate about sneakers. look, at some point somebody comes along and pushes you out of something you have interest in, and you know, it's no different than being on eBay and, you know, bidding on anything, right? Eventually you got to say, hey, this is not my game to play anymore. But I think what's cool about it is, you know, seeing, like, it's much more appealing to me because there's so many more people interested in the various aspects of trading cards, where in sneakers, you know, we've funneled more people into the same things than diversifying and opening minds to other opportunities out there. But I guess that said, you know, how do you guys feel about grading and all the aspects of what grading is at this point?
I'm of the three of us here, I'm the last person on the grading train, right? Like, not that I wouldn't have gotten on it 5 years ago. It was just something that wasn't a priority because these were mostly personal collections. I wasn't looking to sell. And then the hobby just like literally went kaboom. There's an insert of cards that are called kaboom. Like, it's like very appropriate. And so I just sent off my first card submission. Like I said, I'm really late on that front. I have had graded cards come into my collection, or cards one-off that I have been on a break-in and they've submitted them for me directly. But like, as far as me going through cards that I want to keep in the collection, that kind of stuff, or cards that I do want to move that are a little bit more higher end, those are now finally off at a grading service. But I'll let Mitch and Andy answer the rest from the experts.
Yeah, I mean, if it weren't for Bullpen being down the road, which is a local shop, like, I don't know if I would have got into grading. Like, they made it easy and accessible for me, and it was just a matter of me putting in the time I wanted to put in, watching YouTube videos about how to observe your cards, like what to look at, what to look for, what centering looks like on different lines and different products. Like, that stuff takes some time, and grading just depends on what you want to do with the cards. Like, if it's personal stuff and it's just people that you want to have around, like, that's fine. Like, I have a bunch of Chase Claypool stuff that is in bad shape that I'll never grade. But there's other stuff, like my uncle gave me a Steve Young rookie, which was an 80. Oh, what year is that? 88, 89 Topps card. And like, it was in bad shape, but I sent it in to get cemented in this encased thing forever. Like, it graded a 5. Yeah, that sucks, but I don't really care. Like, it's just not going to deteriorate anymore, and I'm happy with that. And then there's the other side of, like, you buy singles on eBay, like this Donovan Mitchell that I just got. You can pixel poke eBay listings and find great cards that you can flip fairly easily. I mean, PSA takes forever right now, so you have to be patient. But I see it as another like form of growing my money with these players that I like, that I think are going to do well. And I'm fortunate enough to not need the $150 that this card costed me raw, but I will be very happy when it comes back at 10 and it costs somebody $1,200. So like, there's that aspect of it too. So it just comes down to the time you want to dedicate to it and your goals with PSA, because if your goal is to get rich overnight with PSA, it is never going to happen. Like, I submitted my first submission back in May of last year, and I didn't get that submission back until about a month ago. So this thing takes a lot of time, and you learn a lot along the way. You're going to mess up your first time, so do not put all your chickens in the first basket or all your eggs in the first basket. Like, piece it out. Make sure you're doing your homework, because especially with PSA pricing now, like, you can really hurt yourself if you're not taking your time.
Up until March 1st, and Mitch kind of alluded to it with the price increases from PSA. Up until March 1st, grading was the easiest way to increase your collection value and give you an opportunity to buy, sell, trade, flip your way into cards that you personally wanted. Well, that was my main objective. I wanted a Michael Jordan rookie card when I first started collecting, and at the time it was like, PSA 9s were 5,000 plus, and there's no way I can afford paying $5,000 out of my pocket, to do that. And so I graded cards. I graded Chris Bryant cards. I graded, um, mostly Cubs players, and just kind of graded my way to a point where I can get these cards, sell them, and then be able to afford to pay for a Michael Jordan rookie card. So I think grading has its place in the hobby. There are people, who are so anti-grading, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's fine. I think grading in itself was really more of a marketing tool, and a way to lengthen people's involvement in the hobby. I still think that's the case right now with this backlog that we're seeing at all the grading companies, not just PSA. But I also think that, like Mitch said, there are old cards that I send in for grading, and it doesn't matter what grade it gets. It's more than anything, it's encapsulated, it's protected, and it's a nice, piece to display on a shelf, on your office, in your office, on your desk, or just hold in a collection, that was passed down to you from a previous generation. So I think it definitely has its place in the hobby. There's good and there's bad to it, like in all things. But I think it's a great way to, ultimately just to gain knowledge in the hobby, to learn about this hobby, and, like it or leave it. I think it's just here to stay. Yeah.
I think it also it kind of incorporates, now that NFTs and the blockchain are starting to blow up, it gives you this security of the tracking, and it being, I'll use blockchain terminology, but it's on a ledger of sorts on the PSA site. Whereas on the new cases, there's a QR code that you can scan with your phone, and it'll automatically pull up that card, and you can instantly check, and it's tracked. And to some extent, I think you can even see who owned it before you, or who it's transacted through, as long as PSA has tracked the progress of that card. It's usually only bigger ones. But functionally, I think that is the biggest win for PSA. Aside from the monetary thing, that's the biggest functional difference grading gets for your cards.
Yeah, I think it's security if you're buying a card that is of a significant value to add to your collection, or to invest in on that front.
So I think we all know the sneaker savant JT, with the sneaker cards that he created independently. How do you all view the hobby in that sense of obviously there's some massive players, and it's such a it's almost impossible to even think of all the people that are doing this kind of stuff, right? Is there room for independent companies, independent creators to come in and be a part of this in a way that, they can eventually become, a bigger player in the marketplace? Or is it just come get a little piece of the pie and be happy with that pie, I guess, as an analogy?
It's a little bit difficult right now due to licensing rights, whereas Panini is only able to do they're the only ones that can have NFL logos, or the only ones that can have NBA logos. That part's tough. So if you want to do this in a legal friendly environment, that makes it a really hard barrier to enter as an independent player in this. But if you're an artist and you're willing to work with those companies, we've seen instances of that working out really well, or you see Ben Baller, or you see, most will argue that Topps 2020 wasn't great, but they worked with a lot of artists, and I think that's cool. And some of them I know through Twitter, and I'm that's freaking crazy that some of the people I know through Twitter are making cards for Topps. That's cool to me. And this is unfortunately bad timing for this, but Deshaun Watson made his own card with a local Houston artist. There are opportunities for that, but in terms of officially licensed, that's where you start to get a little bit tricky.
Do you think we'll see more of that with the independent artists?
I think so.
Can answer that.
As long as the sneaker and sneaker adjacent worlds continue to pour into the trading card world, I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, there's an artist that did a series on like Kyle Kuzma, Jason Tatum, and Donovan Mitchell, right? He did a lot of the 2020 cards as well. But yeah, I think one of the things, there's a forum that I pay attention to, and I'm like not going to give any specifics because I don't want anyone to actually get in trouble because it's Topps cards and that kind of stuff. But there's, creators who are making versions of their cards in an art sense where they're like doing cutouts, putting foil on it, combining cards, right? It's the same size, like 2.5 by 3. But their eye for what they think is great is really amazing. And it's really amazing to see the cool stuff that they're coming up with. And, I think they're being inspired by a lot of the stuff that you see through the official channels like Project 2020 or, anything else that's in that kind of vein. And it's really cool. And to see artists getting really creative in, sports cards, I think it's cool. Like, it just makes me want to collect more stuff.
Yeah, I think we've seen with like Project 2020, you saw a bunch of different artists get into it and create their own interpretation of iconic rookie cards, rookie baseball cards and whatnot. But a byproduct of that, which I thought was kind of interesting, was there were people taking the artist's card and then they're customizing the artist's card. And they're just adding like another design on top of it and then selling that on eBay. So it's like an artist's version of an artist's card of the original rookie card, right? So
there's some card inception there.
Yeah. So yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting and it was super niche. But I mean, it's sold. People were buying it and people were digging the artwork and appreciating it and whatnot. There's also people out there who make custom cards, and like Mitch said, it's not exactly, on the legal side of things, but like there are guys that make Michael Jordan cards for current products and they sell it. Like, what does a Michael Jordan card look like out of 2019 Prism basketball? And then they'll make it. Or what does, a Zion Williamson look like out of, a Precious Metal Gems card? What does a Zion look like in that? So there's definitely a market in terms of that as well. I don't know, like how big it gets. I'm not sure. And I've gotten cards from Sneaker Savant, and I've gotten some of those, the Kobe ones, and then he just sent me some of the sneaker cards, and I think it's dope. I think it's awesome. And as somebody who collected sneakers, it's really cool just to see. But yeah, I think there's still a ways to go, but I definitely think like I can envision where similar to like Comic Cons where you have like an artist's alley. I can see something like that for like independent card makers and just showing off their skills and just, some things that they're passionate about.
Yeah, that's interesting that you brought that up because that's kind of where my mind goes with that whole conversation is like, it's like Juli said, it's like an inception of sorts, right? Like at some point, like we're just like, we're all creating what we want out of whatever we're doing, and sometimes that is, I absolutely drew on some of the cards as a kid and never really thought about it, and then beyond that, right? Like to Juli's point about the autographs, like I remember when we had players that we just didn't care about, we would pretend that we were creating a new autograph for them and designing a cool autograph on their card. I mean, I don't have any of those now, or it'd be just funny to see them at this point. But so the other part of that conversation that I think I wonder if it will ever circle back into, I guess, the more bigger picture of the hobby, is that there's always been a lot of, not always, I would say for the past 5 to 10 years, right? Like prior to, let's say 2018, 2017, trading cards were in a massive dip, right? Like, I mean, the last time we all were super passionate about this, most people talked about this is an industry that's going to completely die and go away like a newspaper or something, right? Like people were just like, it's not going to be around. But then there's a lot of things that I think have been almost created as more like promotional items, right? I don't know if Mitch and I, if you and I talked about this, but I know Kith made a set of cards for, I think, their ASICS releases at some point along the way. And like a lot of it's super nuanced, right? So like, we're going to have an audience that's going to understand Kith and, an ASICS collab and all that stuff. But I think there's other interesting aspects of that could really shape a lot of different, even more interest in this, right? Because you could bring people in through a common connection that doesn't fall in the, for that, example, doesn't fall into the licensing conversation at all, right? It's like, look, if they're partnering to make shoes, they've probably already had the conversation and whatever approval needed from ASICS to make that as a card set. But they also don't track it. They don't, there's no QR codes, right? Like it's a very simple way of creating cards. So I think it, all of those points is going to be a fascinating thing to watch as all of this progresses to much bigger and bigger audiences. To Julie's point at the very beginning, right? Like the Tops Now stuff expanded so much into different, various aspects of life that we probably would have never. I think maybe as people that were into cards at some point, you have a slight interest to just pay attention, but you don't have the desire to go be a part of that. It's more like, that's a cool thing over there. I like knowing about that. And yet now we're like, that's a cool thing. I should probably just in case have that because it's cool and this is a first time thing and you never know. And I think that's also, not to go down this path, but that's also part of the NFT blockchain conversation, right? It's like, we're in this really interesting place where like, people are like, this is the first of it, just go for it, see what happens, right? And so I say that to kind of get to my last question for all of you before we wrap up. The NFT thing is obviously going to be a part of this conversation in the future at some point, right? And I think that the just jump in mentality is fun. And if you are smart about that, I would say, yes, jump into anything because that's how you're going to learn, but be prepared to learn the hard way in a lot of senses. Like I think a lot of people could relate to, or know someone who lost a lot with Bitcoin over the years because they didn't think of it in the right way or thought it was going to be, weren't ready for the whole roller coaster ride and tried to get on or off somewhere in the middle of it. And so what is your kind of greatest mistake, so to speak, in like a purchase or like, something you got excited about where you're like, wow, this was like not what I thought it was? To kind of thinking about like, if somebody watches this and says, hey, I got to go check this out, where should I buy stuff? Are there any examples of that for each of you that you've been like, yeah, this was not the right idea?
I mean, for me, it's one of those things where my personal taste sometimes is not stuff that sells, right? Like in the sense of like, so what I want to collect, I have to know going in that like if I spend $200 on a card that because somebody's value skyrocketed for a week, that card might be worth $20 in 2 months, but it's in my PC and I'm happy that it's there, right? And so that's kind of how I approach it when I'm buying things, especially like one-off, where I'm like, okay, is this a price I want to pay for, right? Like the idea of like selling your cards or selling shoes, right? It's like, it's only worth as much as somebody's willing to pay for it at that particular moment that you want to either buy it or sell it. And so I think one of the things that I've gone in with kind of an open mind about is that, yeah, like if I'm willing to pay $40 for a Jordan Poole PSA 10, right? Like Jordan Poole may not be in the league in 2 years, but I'm super stoked getting to watch him now, especially, I had tickets to the Warriors last year when everyone was injured and none of their superstars were playing, but I got to watch a lot of these young guys develop their skills in the NBA against LeBron James, right? And it's like that was so fun in that sense, right? So it's like, yeah, I'll spend $40 on a Jordan Poole PSA 10, but I don't know if anyone else will spend $40 if I decide to sell it in 2 months, right? Or 5 years, but I know that it's like, there's a cool memory of me being back up in San Francisco, going to the new Chase Center, watching him play.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is invest at your own speed. Like only spend as much as you're comfortable with losing. Like I think it's very easy to jump in, and for some reason, I don't know if you guys have experienced this too, but it's like you get this sense of like, oh my God, I found this player. I need to go buy everything on eBay right now. Like that's not the case. There's always going to be another day to buy this card. Maybe it's a few bucks more, but like make sure you're doing it at your speed because you can lose a lot really quickly. Like I got down the rabbit hole of wanting to grab a bunch of Colts people, and I was like watching 100 auctions at one time, and I was like, oh my God, like I gotta chill for like 3 weeks because I just went crazy. But like don't put yourself in that situation. There's always going to be a new up and coming player that you want to bet on. Like take your time, do your homework, know what products hold their value, know what don't. Like just make sure you do your homework and make sure you know what you're buying before you get into it. And your safest bet is always the GOATs. Like get the people that are established, that are retired, that have had great careers, because that's established to be like a solid investment. Even when cards go away, like LeBron's rookie card is still going to be worth a lot of money. But yeah, the biggest thing would just be like pace yourself.
Yeah, that pace, that bit about pace is probably the best thing that you can learn and keep in mind for just starting out. I think one of my biggest regrets in terms of collecting was right when I started out, I just went and collected Chris Bryant, and that was it. Like that's all I wanted. You know, he was my favorite Cub at the time. He was in his second year, just won Rookie of the Year, just won MVP, and I was like, that's it. I'm just gonna go ham and just do Chris Bryant. I mean, I still like him as a player. I still have cards of him. But the idea of him turning into, you know, one of the top 3 players in baseball, you know, I mean, it hasn't come to fruition. I mean, it probably won't, but he's still a really great player, right? So I think that's probably where I got burned the most, is just kind of just buying into one player, with the idea it's okay to buy into one player, but I bought into the one player with the idea that this is going to grow exponentially and I'm going to be able to sell it and consolidate into a bigger piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of like it happens in the hobby. It does. But I think it doesn't happen as much as you would think it does. For example, you know, this basketball class you're looking at, you know, 2021 NBA basketball class with LaMelo, and there's maybe like 6-7 rookies that people are going to want to put their money into, you know, but realistically in 5 years, how many of those 5 are really going to have lasting impact in the hobby, right? Yeah. So it's kind of something to keep in mind. I really love the idea of just don't get hit by that FOMO, right? And that's like the biggest thing in this hobby is you just get caught up in the moment and you just get caught up with that FOMO. Luka prices, you know, are going up. Oh my gosh, I need to buy a Luka now. I need to, you know, overextend my budget or whatever because I need to have it at all costs. And inevitably there's market correction and you panic and you don't know what to do. You know, some people might be able to afford a couple $100 hit, you know, some might not, you know. So don't let the FOMO get to you. You know, like Mitch said, there's always going to be another opportunity later on down the line to grab the card that you want. It might cost a little bit more, but, you know, just pace yourself, you know, don't get caught up in that FOMO aspect, you know, and just enjoy the hobby.
Yeah, most definitely. And to circle that back to sneakers as we sign out, I did the same thing with D Rose. Like I'm still a D Rose nerd. You know, I don't look at sneakers as an investment in hardly any way at all. But when I get excited about a player or a signature shoe, you know, the D Rose 1, 2, and 3 I thought were incredible. You know, I might be one of the only people on the planet that's probably pushing close to 50 of those shoes in my collection. And like, they are absolutely not something that most people would care about. But to me, like, it's still special because I went after the nuances. So I think, collectively, that's incredible advice for people that are listening and watching and tuning in, looking at this hobby, because it has become so intimidating from the outside. And I think I'm thankful for you all having this conversation, because I think we kind of alleviate some of those hesitations in like explaining how you can find your own way in this whole thing. So thank you all for spending an hour with me and chatting. I guess let everybody know where they can find you online too, to connect with you and watch you with packs in the future.
You can find me on Instagram at _cards, and Par for the Course Cards on YouTube. I rip every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at night usually, and you can hang out with myself, Mitch, and Juli.
Yeah, I'm at _Juliwood, or my very like small, not super active card Instagram is JLo_breaks. But mostly, yeah, you'll find me in Andy's Discord. I'm on Twitch at Juliwood if you want to come hang out with me anytime. But yeah, for cards, I'm typically in others' rooms.
Right on. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in.
Damn, bro, I don't even
Sorry. Go for it, Mitch.
I don't even get a plug.
Oh, I messed it up because
wow,
the dog got in the room.
That's fine.
She misses you. That's why she's like
roommate.
Trying to mess up my PR run here. I see what it is. That's fine. But yeah, you can find me all across the board at Mitch_Jacobs. I stream on Twitch on Saturday nights. Talk shit on Twitter all the time. Instagram, I post once a year. And then, day to day, you can find me hanging out in Andy's Discord, talking about sports.
Right on. Well, we appreciate you. Thanks for going a little bit over with me too, guys. I miss you all. I can't wait to see your faces in person and talk about this over some nice hot food and cold drinks. So
let's do it.
Love
Blue
you all.
Jam.
Thanks, guys.
Yes.
See you guys.
Bye.